The mansion was silent, but the tension inside could be felt in every corner. Nannies had come and gone, each one leaving with bruises, tears, and whispered warnings about the millionaire's baby who seemed untouchable and unloving. None lasted more than a day, but when a new cleaner arrived, quiet and composed, no one expected anything different. The child's anger had broken trained professionals. What could a maid possibly change? Yet within moments of meeting her, the unthinkable happened. The same baby who kicked and screamed in every embrace leaned forward and kissed her cheek. The Hamilton estate stood like a monument to wealth. Tall glass walls, marble floors, and a staff that moved in silence. Behind the perfection was a truth money couldn't polish. The millionaire's only son, Oliver, was impossible. At just 2 years old, his tantrums had become legend. Nannies came with glowing resumes and left in tears, some swearing never to care for children again. The tabloids whispered about a cursed child, while the father, Richard Hamilton, buried his shame behind closed doors and expensive distractions. When Maya Johnson arrived, no one paid her much attention. She was hired as a cleaner, not a caregiver. A single mother herself, Maya had taken the job out of necessity, not ambition. Her calm nature and steady eyes were out of place in a house ruled by panic. The staff warned her to stay away from the nursery. "He bites," they said. "He hates strangers." Still, Maya believed in treating every space with care, even those closed off by fear. The first time she stepped into the nursery, it wasn't out of defiance. It was instinct. Toys were scattered, curtains drawn, and a chill hung in the air. The boy sat in his crib, fists clenched, glaring like he expected another enemy. But instead of retreating, Maya smiled softly and began humming as she cleaned. What happened next would become the talk of the household. The little boy, known for throwing toys at anyone who dared come near, stopped watching her like prey. His small hands gripped the crib rail, eyes curious. As the lullaby filled the air, the anger in his face softened. For the first time, he didn't scream. He reached out, and the mansion, used to chaos, fell completely silent. From that day on, whispers filled the mansion's long corridors. The cleaner had done what no professional nanny could. Richard Hamilton dismissed it as coincidence. Babies have moods, he reasoned, but the staff saw something different. Every morning when Maya entered the nursery with her cleaning cart, the child's demeanor changed. The wild tantrums vanished. The sound of laughter, something the mansion hadn't heard in months, floated through the air. Maya never forced interaction. She simply worked, humming softly, wiping down shelves, straightening toys. Sometimes she'd glance over and find the little boy watching her, eyes full of quiet wonder. She never spoke to him directly, but her presence alone seemed to calm him. When she moved to leave, he'd whimper until she returned. It wasn't long before the other staff began talking. Some called her a miracle worker. Others whispered in resentment, their voices carrying traces of something darker. "He likes her because she's different," one maid said. "Maybe he's not used to someone like her." The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Someone like her. Maya felt it too. The stares lasted longer than they should. The butler, always polite, started giving her the least desirable tasks. The head housekeeper reminded her of her place. Still, Maya showed up each morning, her quiet grace unshaken. For her, this wasn't about proving anything. It was about the child, a little boy who, despite his privilege, seemed just as lonely as she once had been. One afternoon, Richard finally saw it for himself. He came home early, stepping into the nursery just as Maya was packing her supplies. The scene froze him, his son giggling, nestled in her arms. There were no screams, no kicking, only peace. For a man used to control, the sight was disarming, but peace rarely lasts in a house built on pride. The next day, Richard called for her. His tone was polite but distant, the kind reserved for people he paid to disappear quietly. "You're a cleaner," he said flatly, "not a caretaker. You will not touch my son again." Maya lowered her eyes, nodded once, and returned to her duties. But as she left the office, her heart ached, not for herself, but for the little boy who would wake to find her gone. That evening, the mansion trembled once more with cries. The baby screamed endlessly, rejecting every attempt to soothe him. The same nannies who had once feared his rage now begged him to calm down. Nothing worked. No toys, no songs, no promises. Only one voice could quiet him, and it was the one they'd silenced. By the third night, even Richard's confidence began to crack. The staff avoided his gaze, afraid to speak the truth out loud. He knew what they were thinking. He'd seen it himself, the bond he'd refused to acknowledge. And somewhere in the servants' quarters, Maya sat awake, tears glistening in the dim light, whispering a lullaby to no one but the silence itself. By the fourth day, the mansion was in chaos. The baby's cries echoed through every marble hallway, so piercing that even the neighbors began to ask questions. Doctors came and went, puzzled. No fever, no illness, they said. He's just distressed. Richard Hamilton, who had built empires on logic and control, now found himself powerless in his own home. Sleep-deprived and desperate, he watched his son reject every comfort offered. The toys, the lullabies, the caregivers, nothing mattered. The baby only screamed harder, as though searching for something no one else could give. Finally, in the dead of night, Richard gave in. He went to Maya's small quarters, his pride long since eroded by exhaustion. She opened the door, startled to see the man who once dismissed her standing there, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. "Please," he said, barely above a whisper. "He needs you." Maya hesitated only for a moment. She followed him upstairs, her heart pounding. The nursery looked like a storm had passed through. Blankets torn, toys scattered, a child red-faced from crying. But when he saw her, everything stopped. The baby blinked, hiccuped, and reached out his tiny hands. Maya stepped closer, humming softly. Within seconds, the screaming ceased. He nestled into her arms, resting his head against her shoulder as if nothing else in the world existed. The room fell utterly silent except for her quiet lullaby. Richard stood frozen, watching a truth he had spent his life avoiding unfold before him. The woman he had deemed lesser, the one his guests looked past, had done something no amount of money could buy. She had given his child peace. Tears burned behind his eyes, but he said nothing. For the first time, he saw not just the cleaner, but the human being before him. And in that still moment, surrounded by the echoes of a once broken house, he realized the cruel irony. The one person he had overlooked was the only one capable of love without condition. From that night on, everything changed inside the Hamilton mansion. The once cold hallways seemed softer, the tension lighter. Maya was quietly reinstated, not as a cleaner, but as Oliver's caretaker. Richard didn't make an announcement, nor did he speak of that night again. But everyone noticed the difference. The staff who once mocked her now stepped aside when she passed, their whispers replaced by uneasy silence. Maya, however, carried no pride, only gratitude. Each morning she sang to the boy who now greeted her with laughter instead of tears. Under her care, Oliver began to thrive. He learned to trust, to smile, to sleep through the night. It wasn't magic. It was patience, empathy, and the kind of love that sees past appearances. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the nursery curtains, Richard lingered by the door, watching them. For the first time in years, he felt something stir in him, shame, humility, and a strange sense of hope. He thought of all the women who had come before Maya, polished, educated, approved by agencies, and yet none of them had reached his son's heart. Later that evening, as Maya prepared to leave, Richard stopped her. His voice trembled slightly when he said, "Thank you." It wasn't just for calming his child. It was for showing him the mirror he'd avoided all his life. Because in truth, it wasn't the baby who had to learn to love. It was him. Weeks turned into months. The mansion regained its order, but not its old distance. Maya's presence became the quiet rhythm of the household. When guests asked about the baby's transformation, Richard's answers grew shorter. Sometimes he simply said he met the right person. And though the world outside might still judge by status, color, or class inside those walls, a small miracle had rewritten the rules. In the end, the story wasn't about a millionaire's baby or the maid who soothed him. It was about how love recognizes no boundaries No hierarchy, no skin. Sometimes it takes the most unexpected person to remind us. The worth of a soul can't be measured in wealth, only in compassion. Would you have seen her the same way if the baby hadn't?